During Maycee Barber's fight at UFC 246, I saw something that, like Joe Rogan, I've never seen before and I felt compelled to make a video on. I'm talking about this specific sequence when we saw Barber having her knee examined and then heard that she had a small partial ACL tear. Welcome back everyone to your #1 source for learning about everything related to sports injuries and sports medicine news. In this video, we're going to take a look at the sequence of events that happened here in Maycee Barber's fight at UFC 246, where she was supposedly diagnosed with a small partial ACL tear. I feel compelled on this channel with my audience to make sure that there's no misinformation being spread out there when it comes to medicine. There's a number of really important things that we need to address and talk about during this sequence of the knee exam, because I don't want people getting the wrong idea about what our physical exams can do and how they're performed. Make sure and go subscribe if you like this type of content and want to stay up to date with my future videos, and let's get started. We're just going to jump right to it here, the sequence that I'm talking about. Now, we're not going to look at the actual time when the knee supposedly was injured because that's not the point of this video. But we can see Barber here, she's getting ready to go back and fight, and then it looks like this is the ringside doctor who comes over and basically says that he wants to examine her knee. I'm gonna play this through once, and then we'll comment on some of the specifics.
Keep yourself ready, okay?
I have never seen this in my life. They're doing an examination of her knee.
She's got a small partial ACL tear. She's fine.
Okay. Wow.
You ready to keep going?
What is he, an MRI? Is that guy a human MRI?
So you guys heard that he came up and said to the official, she has a small partial ACL tear. And you were probably wondering, how is it possible? Like Joe Rogan said on the broadcast, what is he, like a human MRI machine? How can he tell that that might have happened? And is it even a proper thing to say? First off, just get in your mind right away that none of these physical exam tests for things like ACL tears have 100% specificity. Specificity of a test is how likely the test is correct whenever it's positive. While we can see specificities for these ACL tear tests up in the 90s, none of them are 100%. So you can do an exam for an ACL tear and have a really high suspicion that there is a rupture, but you cannot say with 100% confidence that there is a rupture. Even if you do suspect a rupture, you can't say partial versus full or small partial versus big partial. Let's dive in now to the actual exam maneuvers that were done here and explain what I think was being attempted. This first position here where the doctor's down, she's sitting on her back. First off, if you're going to diagnose anybody with an ACL tear, you really want to have the person completely supine and flat on their back. Now, I thought the first thing he was going to try to do here was what we call a Lachman test. For most sports medicine doctors, it's the go-to first test we're going to do on the field to look for an ACL tear. Essentially, what you do is you have the athlete down flat, you bend the knee up into a small amount of flexion, you put one hand up on the femur to stabilize it, and then you grab the tibia with your other hand, and you're basically trying to pull the tibia up forward. Remember, your ACL prevents that tibia from translating forward relative to the femur, so your Lachman test is trying to basically pull that tibia forward and see how much laxity that there is. The test is considered positive when there's an excessive amount of movement with no real firm endpoint, especially when you compare it to the other side. So my first thought here was, okay, that's what's going to be done here. But then if we keep watching, that left hand is down on the femur, and it looks like the right hand is somewhere up by the knee, but then there's no real good motion here to actually do a Lachman test. So I don't think that's what was being attempted. If we continue to play it then, he bends the knee up into around 45 degrees of knee flexion. So that's when he's up here, the knee's bent, that's our sort of 45-degree flexion position for what we would call the anterior drawer test. An anterior drawer test is trying to do basically the same thing. You're trying to stabilize the foot and then pull the tibia forward relative to the femur to again look for any sort of excessive movement of the tibia without a firm endpoint from that ACL engaging. So when you're doing this, the setup that we're taught to do is you have the person flat on their back, you sit on their foot because you want to really make sure that you've anchored the tibia and anchored the foot, and then you take both hands behind the tibia and you pull forward with a lot of force. If we keep watching this here and we let it play, the doctor here looks like there's maybe some movements trying to kind of grab forward on the knee. But even if we go back and watch this multiple times, there's no real good firm translation that's attempted with that tibia. You can even tell watching this back that knee does move a little bit. But if you watch, it's really the whole leg that's moving. It's not the tibia that's moving relative to the femur. And a lot of this is just because of the proper positioning that you need to have whenever you do this test. The other really important part about doing any sort of these physical exam maneuvers for things like an ACL tear is you always have to compare it to the other side. Some people just have naturally lax and loose joints and loose ligaments, And so you can be fooled by thinking that someone has a ligament tear when it's really just the natural way they're built. It's happened to me a bunch of times in clinic where I'm checking someone for an ACL tear. I go to the unaffected side first and I say, oh my goodness, that's actually quite a bit of movement. And then I go to the side that was supposedly injured and it's the same. They both feel loose, but that's just the way the person is naturally built. So it's extremely important to compare to the other side before saying that someone has a positive test. Let's say though that the test was done as accurately as possible in any sort of circumstance. Even then, like I said, you don't have a 100% specificity to say with that much level of confidence that someone has an ACL tear. So it's important to tell someone that you would suspect that they have an ACL tear, that you're really concerned about an ACL tear, but you can't tell with 100% certainty unless you've gotten an MRI. I think it's important too here to realize that a lot of these ringside physicians for UFC fights are actually not musculoskeletal trained. Most of them are neurologists. And a neurologist doesn't go through the musculoskeletal exam training that someone like an orthopedic surgeon or a primary care sports medicine doctor would do. So unless someone has done a lot of other extensive training, you can't really expect someone to be extremely proficient with performing these physical exam maneuvers. They're difficult to do. They take a lot of time to practice and get really good at them. It's not something you can just go do once and be confident in doing it. So yeah, this was a little bit concerning to watch and see. And like I said, I'm doing this video because I don't want people to get misinformation about the way these physical exams work and whether or not we can say with 100% certainty that someone has this type of an injury without doing something like an MRI. And to be honest, watching this, it's not really the performing of the exam maneuver that I think is the biggest thing that stands out to me. It's saying that someone has an ACL tear just based on doing that brief and that type of an exam. You can't say that with 100% certainty, and that's just not the way things work. So I hope you guys learned something from this video. It's always good to ask these types of questions and hopefully learn from these types of situations so that things can be done better and done differently the next time. Let me know any questions or comments you have below, and until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.